In August 2025, the Nechako River delivered an unexpected surprise, a strong return of sockeye and pink salmon. The run was healthy enough that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans opened a short sport fishery, allowing freshwater anglers an exceptional chance to catch and keep salmon right in the heart of our city. Word spread quickly. Boat launches filled. Hundreds of lines stretched across the current, and the riverbanks came alive with families, friends, and anglers of every skill level. It wasn't just about the catch. It was also about being part of something special. For a few remarkable weeks, the Nechako became a gathering place, a reminder of how deeply this river runs through the life of the community. For many, it wasn't just a chance to fish. It was a moment to reconnect with nature, the river, and to experience a style of fishing seldom associated with the interior of BC. Opportunities like these don't just happen on their own. Securing an opening to harvest these fish was thanks to the hard work of anglers and volunteers who care enough to turn possibility into opportunity.
My name is Dan Pollard. I'm the chair of the Sport Fishing Advisory Committee, which falls under the umbrella of the Sport Fishing Advisory Board. And I'm also a director for the Spruce City Wildlife Association. I also belong to the Inland Fisheries, which is part of the Sport Fishing Advisory Board. So I hear a lot of information, what's going on down on the coast, what kind of numbers they're expecting to see for sockeye. So how the sockeye opening came about for us as the Sport Fish Advisory Committee is we saw an opportunity. We make a motion that we'd like to see an opening on the Nechako River. And we also would like to see pink fishery as well. And so that motion goes to the Inland Working Group, and then it goes to the Sport Fish Advisory Board, and they look at it, they vote on it, and they voted in favor of our local area of getting that opportunity. And then it gets recommended to the Department of Fisheries. And then Department of Fisheries says, hey, look, we're going to allow this to go through. It takes a lot of work, communication-wise, with Department of Fisheries, along with the Salmon Working Group, and then it happens.
We've learned that it's up to volunteers and enthusiastic anglers to look for opportunities for freshwater salmon fisheries. Once they've identified an opportunity and shared the desire for an opening with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, what does it actually take to make it happen?
I'm Rob Martin. I'm a DFO Resource Manager for Prince George office. I work with all sectors of fisheries on the Fraser River upstream of the Fraser-Thompson confluence. So DFO is responsible for 3 different types of harvest sectors. Those would be commercial, recreational, and First Nations. Primary factor for harvest management is ensuring that enough spawners reach the spawning grounds to ensure productivity of future salmon cycles. Once our spawning ground escapements are thought to be achieved, DFO can begin engaging on opening fisheries. The priority after conservation is ensuring that First Nation food, social, and ceremonial objectives are met. Once this occurs, recreational fisheries can begin to be considered based on a variety of factors like run size, anticipated catch, run timing, potential to intercept stocks of concern, the ability to monitor the fishery, as well as other things. DFO also works with the local Sport Fish Advisory Committee to receive advice on local opening interests for the area. In 2025, DFO observed an unexpected abundance of Fraser sockeye entering the Fraser River. These sockeye are counted by the Pacific Salmon Commission in the Lower Fraser Marine area. As the run size increased, both conservation and First Nation food, social, ceremonial needs were met, so DFO was able to begin initiating discussions with commercial and recreational harvesters. The local Sportfish Advisory Committee in Prince George indicated they'd like to see a sockeye opening similar to what had been in 2022, and this fell in line with DFO's harvest and management objectives, so the opening was able to be supported. In practice, pink salmon management is very similar to sockeye management. The Fraser pink run size for 2025 was expected to be quite large. As in-season information came in, this confirmed preseason run size expectations. The local Sportfish Advisory Committee identified having a pink fishery in the Prince George area as an interest. This fit in with harvest and conservation objectives. The department was able to support a pink fishery in the Prince George area for the first time. Continued communication is valuable for DFO's decision-making process. It's important for DFO to hear the interests, concerns, and observations of the public at all levels to know how the resource may be most appropriately managed.
So, how exactly did we end up with a month-long summer season to harvest these amazing fish during some of the nicest weather of the year?
When it comes to the opening, what time it's going to open, there's communication with the Department of Fisheries saying, okay, these are some stocks at risk or endangered that are going up same time. So we need to bump it ahead a week, or we can move it back a week. This year, we were very happy to say that we recommended August the 28th to September 21st, and DFO came back to us and said, look, we can actually bump it back a week, and it'll be opened on August the 22nd. And I mean, that's awesome. That's like opening a Christmas present and you're finding you got two gifts. And this year was something special. I've never witnessed anything like the buzz that happened this year. You drive by the John Hart Bridge and you look down river and you count 20, 30 people, and you look further down river and there's another 20. And then, I mean, this bar just up from us here, there had to be 100 people one day on that bar fishing, right? It was awesome. Spruce City Wildlife and the Upper Fraser Sport Advisory Committee, we're always looking for people. So if people enjoyed the fishery this year and they want to take part in being a part of this success, then please, look online and put your name forward, and we'll give you the times when there'll be a meeting, and you'll be invited. Who knows where it'll take you. Anytime that you're willing to volunteer and give us some of your time is appreciated.
So, what makes these fish special? Where are they going? And why are they so far from the ocean?
My name is Mark Shrimpton. I'm a professor in the Ecosystem Science and Management Department at the University of Northern British Columbia. And I've been studying fish, mainly salmonids, for the last about 40 years. I'm not an angler. My interest in fish is basically because they are a very fascinating model organism to look at. Sockeye salmon that are migrating up the Nechako River migrate through a number of lakes to tributary streams. So the Stewart Tackless system is one location where they spawn. And then we have the Nadina system, which tends to be a little bit earlier, and they will actually migrate through Fraser Lake, through Francois Lake, and then spawn into tributaries to Francois Lake, including the Nadina. And then a little bit later run system is the Stalaco. Why migrate 1,000 kilometers? Good, clear, clean water with lovely substrate. And essentially the substrate is the right size of rocks. So something that the female can actually dig her redd in, generally kind of cobble size, and she'll construct something that we refer to as a redd. Once she's created that redd, the male will actually fertilize her eggs as she's depositing them then, and then the female will cover them over. So after the adults have spawned, the eggs begin to develop in the gravel. And The development rate is strictly dependent on temperature, and so it's quite slow through the winter, and then as temperatures start to warm up, the development rate will increase. For most populations, it's sort of in the middle of the winter where the eggs will actually hatch. And you have the stage that's referred to as an alevin. In the spring, they will emerge from the gravel, the yolk is all absorbed, and that's where they'll migrate downstream to the lake. And then they'll begin to feed in the lake. And generally they feed on small plankton within the lakes. And they'll rear in the lakes for about a year. Residence in a lake makes the sockeye really quite different.
After a year in fresh water, it's time for these young salmon to continue their journey.
So they go from that freshwater fish to a fish that's capable of living in seawater, which is, I think, really quite remarkable because you're going from a freshwater environment to now in the ocean, which is about 3 times as salty as their body. So that transition is really quite remarkable that salmon can do it. Essentially, when they head out of the Fraser River, they hang right and they migrate north. They go up along our coast, and then basically they just swim around in the ocean, sort of off the Alaska Panhandle.
For about 3 years, these fish eat all they can in the rich temperate seas before something starts to change in them.
Once they reach a critical size, they are able to become sexually mature. And what we know is that those changes are occurring in advance of them hitting fresh water. They basically head back to the coastline, migrate down our coast, and then they enter fresh water. And depending on the population that we are looking at, they'll enter fresh water anytime between sort of early July, and some of the later run populations will actually enter as late as sort of middle of September or a little later than that, and they'll spawn in different locations.
It's a tough journey, and salmon require specific conditions if they are going to complete the trip home.
Salmon are what we refer to as poikilotherms or ectotherms. They get their heat from the environment. For salmon migrating upstream, its metabolic rate is going to be dependent on the temperature of the water. So as the water temperature increases, the metabolic rate goes up. And if you stop eating when you hit fresh water, like all of our salmon do, then you have a finite amount of energy left until you get to the spawning grounds. So if your metabolic rate is higher, you're going through more energy, even though you still have to get the same distance. So you get to the spawning grounds with less energy. Although the metabolic rate increases with temperature, the amount of oxygen that's dissolved in the water decreases with temperature. And you get to a point where the metabolic demand is actually greater than the amount of oxygen that's there. So you start running into problems. So in 1952, the Kenny Dam was completed. Because it is now a flow-controlled river, there is an agreement that the water is actually released from the Skins Lake, increasing through the summer. And a lot of that is to just create more water within the Nechako River system and what they term as cooling flows, so that they can maintain the water temperatures cool. Because as you can imagine, if you have a large river like the Nechako with not much water in it, it will get quite warm just from a nice sunny day. But if you got a lot of water, it won't heat up as much. Water release then is designed to actually benefit particularly those sockeye salmon as they're migrating up into the Stewart River system as well as into the Nechako.
So if temperatures and conditions allow, the sockeye return to their spawning grounds and the cycle begins again. We've seen and heard a lot about the sockeye, but what about those other salmon we mentioned? How do pink salmon end up here?
Pink salmon have quite a different life history than sockeye salmon. Pink salmon have a very fixed 2-year life cycle. So the adults will mature when they're 2 years old. They generally tend to migrate into the lower portions of most of our coastal river systems. So they don't tend to migrate very far up. Sort of 100 kilometers is a long way for a pink salmon. There's actually even some evidence that some will spawn kind of around the intertidal line, so just above the high tide mark in some river systems. And so you think, well, they're not really long distance migrating fish, but we do see that in the Fraser, there often are runs of pink that come fair ways up. Often we see them in the Quesnel River system, and then every now and then we see them in the Nechako River as well. So this appears to be a year when pink are migrating much greater distances.
We now know what these fish are all about, where they are headed, and what it takes to secure an opportunity for us to harvest them. But what's it like actually fishing for them?
I'm Jennifer Cote, and I'm an avid outdoors person. I like to hunt, fish, and forage, and I like to be outside as much as possible and gathering and harvesting anything off the land that I can. I'm actually a very big ice fisher person. Ice fishing is probably my favorite time to go fishing. And other than that, I'm typically on the lake in a boat fishing, trolling. I haven't fished for sockeye on any river for about 20 years, so when it opened up in Prince George, I was pretty game to try it. And my husband had all the salmon gear from when we lived in the Lower Mainland, so we pulled it all out and got everything rigged up and came down here and gave it a try. I found that a lot of people have been pretty helpful in giving me tips and giving me advice of what to do, how to fish. So I found the community, the fishing community here, pretty helpful. Very helpful, because with some tips and advice, I managed to hook into some sockeye with their help. So I was just over in the corner over there, and there was some people fishing on the left of me, some people fishing on the right of me, and they're bringing in fish, and I'm not catching anything. The people to my left just kind of kept bringing them in, losing them, but they're just having a great old time at 7 o'clock in the morning. And as they were packing up to go, I ran over there and I'm like, what are you doing that I'm not doing, right? And I asked him some questions, and he kind of said like, hey, maybe my leader was a little too long and I had probably too much wool on my hook. So with these adjustments, I was hooked into some fish and had my limit within 20 minutes. So obviously the run was probably happening, but without his help, I don't think I would have caught any that morning. And then on the Wednesday before, I was fishing, and I see these people bringing in fish as well, and I'm like, what are you doing? Are you doing a bouncing Betty? He's like, yeah, I got a bouncing Betty. And he's like, I have a 1 ounce weight on, and I had a 2 ounce weight, and I switched over to a 1 ounce weight, and yeah, I started hooking into some fish and brought home 2 sockeye after that. So it was nice. Yeah, I just learned a little bit more what you're trying to feel for when the weight's bouncing off the bottom, leader lengths. Like for example, if you're in really, really fast water, you should be using a longer leader. Slower water, you should be using a shorter leader. And depending on the water flow, you're using anywhere between 1 ounce and 2 ounce weights. And I learned, what time you need to get here if you want a certain spot on the river, right? And just, just exploring different parts of the river. I was down at Wilson the other day, just exploring 1 kilometer of the river, just walking the riverbank with the dogs, and just trying to gauge the river, read the river. I think it's very important to have this opportunity, this sockeye salmon fishing opportunity, even for the pinks that are coming. It's really important just because we just don't have it up here, and ever since it opened, there's been a lot of excitement. A lot of people have to travel to Kitimat or down south to do these opportunities, and that's time and money. A lot of people come here before work or after work, put in a couple hours. So it's been really fantastic, and you meet your friends on the river, your neighbors on the river. You plan outings together. So it's just been really nice, and I'm sure the local companies, they're benefiting from the extra money spent. So there's money going into the economy. I believe that probably more salmon licenses have been bought too, right? And all that goes towards conservation efforts. I'm going to be out here every morning if I can to try to hook into the season before it closes. I really like going home and cooking fresh salmon for the family, and just learning to play with more recipes. The more salmon you have, the more different things you get to try. And as a hunter and gatherer, I play with a lot of food, so salmon's part of that. And yeah, I'd be grateful to get another one to go home and try a new recipe and cook for the family.
For some, getting on the river is a daily ritual during the season. For others, it's about family, tradition, and simply making the most of a rare opportunity.
My name's Daryl Schultz. I'm here with my son Kyler this morning. Avid fisherman, outdoors people from Prince George, born and raised. I was from a pretty outdoorsy family, so yeah, I was exposed to it as a kid. My grandparents lived on the Nechako, and I only lived a few doors down from them. So I spent most of my childhood, I mean, the summers were all down here. And I do remember as a kid seeing sockeye swim by, but there was never an opening or no talk of that. So I knew the salmon existed in the Nechako, but they were always sort of just something that was maybe in the water that you didn't utilize, you didn't really know to what extent, the amount, the numbers of fish, where they were going. Knowing now, you know, how much of an important run and river this is to the sockeye in the region, it's pretty vital and important to have a healthy sockeye run here. For salmon, typically our minimum drive time would be 4 hours when you get to the Babine, but often we would be all the way to Prince Rupert. I've even fished Haida Gwaii, so that's, as you can imagine, a lot of time and expense to go those distances. So to be able to have that opportunity here in Prince George is something that I don't take lightly. It's pretty neat. We fished this opening quite a bit. I'd probably guess I've done maybe 10 or 12 outings this year, sometimes just before work, sometimes after work, sometimes on the weekends. Having a spot to fish salmon just minutes from your house is pretty special. It's something that we don't often get in Prince George, and to be able to come out with your family and have the kids and friends, whoever you wanted to bring along, get them to get into some salmon, and we'd go home that night and we'd fillet them, we'd get the smoker going, and it was pretty neat, pretty out of the ordinary for here. And just to be able to catch a salmon and then go home and process it, put it on the barbecue, eat it. If you've never experienced that, it's a pretty cool feeling to be able to go and harvest your own food and then eat it. So super blessed to have that opportunity in my life.
As the season drew to a close, the Nechako River slowed back to its quiet rhythm. But for many, this year will be remembered as something extraordinary. What began with a few hopeful voices became a moment shared by an entire community. Through careful work by advocates and collaboration with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, opportunity met responsibility, a model for how people and policy can come together when the river gives a gift. The sockeye and pink salmon that filled these waters remind us of nature's resilience and of how closely our own stories run alongside theirs. Each fish that returned carried generations of survival. Each cast from the shore carried a sense of gratitude. For anglers, it was a season of connection with family, with water, and with the living pulse of the Nechako. For the community, it was proof that when abundance returns, it brings people together. And as the river settles into another cycle, there's a shared hope that this won't be the last time the Nechako runs red with life. A reminder that when nature surprises us, it's worth celebrating.